Hey everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. See, the Zoom voice says recording. It's beautiful how the automated. I suppose that's an AI. I don't know, but I am pleased to be talking with and recording with Kate Hannigan this morning. Kate, thank you for jumping in and joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I see your social media profile picture right behind you there in the corner. I love that. Love
That's
that.
from a reader. A young reader sent that, and I just love it. So I just put it right there because it does echo the avatar and stuff.
Oh
I've
yeah.
got,
Love it, love it.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So folks out there might know you from a couple of things, one of those being history comics. You also have a series of superhero books, the League of Superheroes, which are sort of a nice chapter book meets manga style that we can talk about. And then you have a number of other books as well. So, just curious about your path to this world of creating, and not all about superheroes, but largely about comics, superheroes, and comics oriented things.
Well, I always try to like I love the world of kid lit because first of all, everybody's nice. Everybody
Hmm.
plays
Hmm.
nice. You get to meet people like you get to meet,
I
great
tried. I tried.
librarians, teachers, the kids, like booksellers. It's a really fun world. So for me, being in this world, the reason I write for kids is because I feel very connected to the kid I was. And that
Hmm.
kid was not a big reader. I always tell kids on school visits, I have them raise their hand, who feels like they're a good writer, who's a good reader. I was a good player. I like to play, imagination play, and always had that action figure in my pocket wherever I went. Even now downstairs, I have a purse and I have action figures I find on my walks and things. Like I love just
Oh, love
having
it.
a little play. So I don't think I was a strong reader, and even now I read a ton. I take in books and stories uh, through ebooks, paper books, audiobooks.
Hmm.
I'm a slow reader, so I feel like I decided to write to the kid I was.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm so drawn to the visual storytelling. I mean, I'm not an artist. My mom's an artist. I have a bunch of her art in my house. I think I grew up, around thinking visually. My brother does movies, so just like thinking in those terms. But we also grew up in a house full of books, so I knew reading was important. Um, so to me, I think the storytelling that can help a kid along um, is great. And that even now, I love to pick up graphic novels now because, and I'm married to a neuroscientist, so maybe this has some interplay there too. But just the idea that the visual and the language works on your brain in two ways as you take in the stories. So when I got the opportunity to work on the history comics line, I jumped at it because it's so hard to get kids fired up about history, but if we can
Hmm.
do it in a way that is so accessible, I mean, the minute you see a kid pick up this book, whether they're a big reader or not, the pictures pull them in. And
Yeah.
even on my books that are more traditionally just, the traditional narrative form of text.
Hmm.
Um, the first book I came out with was illustrated. It's a chapter book, but there were a lot of illustrations, and you could just see kids make the decision in their head as they picked it up, like, oh, I can do this. There's pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So that's
Well,
what pulled me in. That's what pulled me in is just the idea of reaching that reader that I was, kind of a reluctant reader. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but you know, less capable. I don't know. Is that an okay thing to say? I wasn't a great.
yeah. I think that works. I think that
Yeah.
works.
I mean, you have to grow into it, right? It's habit. And when you sit down with a book, you realize over the years that wow, I can do a 600-page book. I can read
Hmm.
that. But I think as a kid, anything that will help drop that barrier to entry and pull kids into reading. That's why I love graphic novels. The end.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
Long answer.
Same. No. That's a great answer. And just thinking about sort of the muscles that kids build. Really, I mean, kids of any age uh, build reading a graphic novel or verse novel or any type of text, and how. I mean, you have the 600-page book, but without those invitations, without those ways of storying, it can be very intimidating. And at the same time, comics are complex in their own right. And the history comics, I'll say, it's not like it's not like those books take a textbook and go, here's your textbook with illustrations and cartoons. Those books do really interesting things as far as kind of a narrative approach along with the history, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. In writing this, that is exactly what I had to kind of wrestle with is like I don't want to just do like textbook mashed into a different format. So
Hmm. Hmm.
so I remember reading like the first review about this where they described the fictive children who take the reader through kind of for the so that you can kind of see the Chicago fire through their eyes. But
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for dogs, and I know you're going to probably hear my dog. I have a
it works. It
endemic
works.
puppy named Kevin, who almost certainly is going to bark in a minute here. But I put a puppy in here because I was like, okay, we need kids to care. So there's like
Hmm. Hmm.
a puppy that has to make it through the Great Chicago Fire. But yeah, I like that they allowed me as an author to kind of find my way into the story, making it a narrative nonfiction.
Yeah, and you mentioned action figures, so I'm just gonna pull mine in from over here. There's my
Oh,
Michael Keaton
love it. Love it.
Batman that's sort of hanging out with me. Um, and I love that idea too of telling stories with even toys. When I was a kid, I remember taking action figures and I'd have the soundtrack to movies that I loved on a cassette and I put the cassette on and then I'd sort of play out a story. It was a multimodal experience. There was a lot
It
going
sounds
on.
awesome. But I mean, that's what storytelling is, right? We're world building. We have the good guys and the
Hmm.
bad guys. We have the conflict. We get to name everybody.
Hmm.
So I tell
Hmm.
kids, you keep on playing because that's just kind of what storytelling is this continuation of this play that we had when we're kids.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So I'm inspired by the artwork from a reader. Do you have a story of sort of encountering a young reader and having sort of a funny or positive interaction around your work?
oh, the thing I like to do with kids. So I'm a history nut. I remember being the kid that like I would sit under the dining room table when the family would get together, and it would be like the aunts, uncles, grandparents, my parents telling stories on each other and they'd be laughing so hard. And I just remember just loving that feeling and eavesdropping on the family lore and the family history. So when I visit schools with kids, I always try to make sure they understand that history, we're living it. Like they just
Hmm.
lived through something. They're going to tell their kids and their grandkids about um, that history is alive. And so I try to encourage them to go home after a school visit and ask the people in their lives about things, whether it's like, where were you at 9/11? Did you march, during the civil rights, in the 60s? Like, people in your life did interesting things, just engage with them. So
Hmm.
after some of the talks around the Cape Mask and Boots, the superhero series, I have had kids come up to me and real shyly come up and say, my grandpa, for them probably it's great grandpa, that someone in their life had participated in World War II or Vietnam, or my mom's in Afghanistan. Like they want to talk about it because they feel connected to sort of the stuff that's going on in the World War II, books. So those sorts of things are incredibly rewarding, just to kind of reinforce to them that history matters, their
Hmm.
story
Hmm.
matters. All of us have stories to tell, so they do, and the people in their lives do. And then just inquiry and being a curious person interacting in the world, ask people about themselves, like talk to people. You learn amazing things from people. So that
Absolutely.
to me is the coolest stuff, is when they come up at the end and they want to talk about their grandparents or great grandparents.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of masks, capes, and boots, just just thinking about the collaboration that you build in there because they start with like this manga vision and then we get sort of the chapter book approach. So I love them as hybrid books too.
Yeah, yeah, I was super excited about this. So yeah, um it it, it was just incredibly fun to get to do this,
Hmm.
to be for this mashup to happen, because I started the whole. So can I just yammer on about how this series came to?
By all means, please do.
Okay. So another thing I try to tell kids is that just about every story that an author is presenting to the world is answering a question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Basically, like I think of like Kate DiCamillo, and Because of Winn-Dixie, which is one of the best, children's books. Will she find a place to belong? Will
Mm-hmm.
she connect with her what is family? All these things. So for me, my question was, who came before Wonder Woman? It was just like one day I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
where did she come from? Was she the first lady superhero? So I started digging and digging and digging, and the history nerd in me, I just fell in love with who I found. And so Fantoma is the answer to that question. Fantoma was the first lady superhero. She had all the superpowers. She had everything, and she flew around in a nightie. Um, but So in answering that, I started thinking about, well, what if these kids could use those early comic book heroines as their mentors, and they
Hmm.
get superpowers? And I thought about making it. I was writing that cusp between, is this going to be a fantasy, or is this going to be, they have a love of superheroes, but then the kids go do things themselves. And then
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I was like, "Ah, I want to fly.
Yeah.
I want some powers." So these three kids get their powers and stuff. But as I was writing, I realized, so there's like 4 chapters in the book that are visual. The rest is traditional,
Mm-hmm.
text.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was writing certain chapters, I was like, why am I pulling from late 30s, early 40s comic books, translating it into, the narrative text, and trying to get the kids to imagine these battle scenes and stuff? Then I was like, why don't I just write them in a visual way, and we'll see if an editor bites. And
Yeah.
so when we shopped it around, Simon and Schuster, Aladdin, it took this, and it was just so exciting to see them, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I was pretty excited with the experience.
Yeah, and they are so enjoyable. I'm also going to mention Alex Grodin, if
Yeah,
I'm saying that person's name correctly.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. She's
yeah.
amazing. She did the history comics. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm in awe. I'm totally in awe of her. So she's got her own, you can look her up. She's got her
Mm-hmm.
own, standalone books that she's done, but to have been, be able to collaborate with her.
Yeah.
She came out to Chicago to kind of go to the Chicago History Museum, because I live in Chicago, and I happen to live just blocks away from the Museum of Science and Industry. If anybody's, been to the south side of Chicago, that the Museum of Science and Industry is the only standing building from the Columbian Exposition of 1893. So I was walking my dog on the grounds where I was right, where I've written about, for the when Chicago rises from the ashes and presents itself to the world in 1893. It was like 20 years after the Great Chicago Fire. So I didn't want to write a book where it's like, hey kids, the city burned to the ground, the end.
Right,
So
right.
the second half of the book the second half of the book is hopeful. It's like, and then we showed the world that, at the Columbian Exposition in 1893, the world came to Chicago's doorstep, and that's when the White City, if you've, heard of Devil in the White City and all that. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was fun to me to be able to be walking on the grounds of what was once, the White City, walking my dog there. But so Alex came out and looked, just did her own research. So her images are just amazing. So I was
Oh
able to,
yeah.
like, I would pull like a letter from an actual survivor of the fire, and then she would kind of, bring that to light. My favorite image in the whole thing is, I wanted, young readers to feel like this book was taking them through the fire, and they were seeing the
Mm-hmm.
fire through the eyes of these kids. And she literally has eyes with fire in them.
How
So
about that?
I just,
The
she blows me
vision is
away. But
captured.
one of my favorite things also is, again, when I talk to kids, it's like through every disaster, there is something that we grow from and we learn from. I mean, isn't there somebody, I can't remember whose quote it is, that every disaster is an opportunity. I feel like
Yes,
that
yeah.
came from a FEMA director or something. I don't know who
Yeah.
that came from. But so when I'm showing, how the city changed its approach to architecture, we were a wooden city in a drought when it burned to the ground. So from the
Mm-hmm.
fire, architecture changed, and that's where the Chicago School of Architecture emerged from that. And so, she did these architectural renderings of the buildings.
Love it.
We're the birthplace of the skyscraper. I mean,
Yeah.
cool stuff. Cool
Very,
stuff.
very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah. And I love that use of like bringing in the history terms. The primary sources, those letters being like on the page visually as well. What a great idea for showing that in a way that's not like you see the reproduced letter often in like a textbook, but what a great way to actually bring the character, bring the person to life, and talk about that experience.
Wow. She's amazing. She's a really talented. I would love to work with her again.
Yeah, she has improve slash improv. I've read that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll also mention Detective's Assistant and Blips on a Screen being two of
Yeah.
your other books as well.
Yeah.
And they're right there. I see you
Yeah.
surrounded by these books. This is wonderful.
Flips was fun because we'll talk about another amazing illustrator, Zachariah O'Hora.
Hmm.
I had written this. I tend to be like, hey kids, here's a bunch of broccoli, like here's a bunch of facts, So this is the guy who invented gaming. So it looks like Pong, but Pong came one iteration after Ralph Baer. So Ralph Baer was the guy who did the Odyssey that was manufactured by Magnavox. And then
Yeah.
Nolan Bushnell came along with Atari after this, like one step after. But so Ralph was there first. But and he has this amazing backstory where he was a Jewish kid growing up in Germany at the rise of the Nazis, and so had to flee for his life, rebuild a life in New York as a refugee, and so childhood ended,
Mhm.
and he had to go work in a factory. And so the idea that that's his backstory and he's given the world's children so much joy, adults too. But when we were talking about illustrators, I was like, could we get him, because his
Yeah.
style is so fun. His style is just so playful and wonderful, and I think it's a great juxtaposition against my really dense here's a bunch of facts, kids. So and then he did like cool Easter eggs, that it's a motherboard there, and then the brown box is what he shopped around to get a TV producer to take interest. So that's a beautiful book, I think. So
Absolutely.
cool
Absolutely.
artist, cool
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah. And Detective's Assistant is the other one that I'll mention.
Oh
And
yeah.
then I'll have one or two more questions for you.
Okay, this book, I would still be working on this if I could, because the story is just so freaking cool.
Hmm.
So it's America's First Woman Detective, again, Chicago based. So I guess I do kind of rely on my city, mining my city's past. But yeah, the Pinkertons have a plot in one of the cemeteries here called Graceland Cemetery. And when I first came across this idea, I was researching a story that has not been published and nobody seems to want, but it was based in 1856. And I saw just this paragraph mention about Alan Pinkerton and this woman who came into his office, and he assumed for a secretary position, and she talked her way into getting him to hire her as a lady detective. And
Hmm.
but most of the books dismissed her as Pinkerton's girlfriend. And I was like, wait, what? And so as I read that she had this role in thwarting the Baltimore plot to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, there were two people on the train taking Lincoln through Baltimore to the safety of entering our nation's capital. It was Alan Pinkerton and Kate Warren. So I was like, perhaps she had a bigger role than being Alan Pinkerton's girlfriend. And so Alan Pinkerton did not describe her as his girlfriend. He said she was one of his most capable detectives. So I went to the cemetery and I like touched her tombstone and kind of whispered to her, I'm going to tell your story. So this was really fun. And it's been optioned for film a couple times. Um, Man, would it be cool if this became something? Because I don't know if you've seen Enola Holmes.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like, let's do an American version.
Yes,
So
yes. And we'll share this out on YouTube. So hopefully if movie and TV people are out there listening, they'll go, "Hey, that could be a thing." I love how you explore history and you find sort of like the first female superheroes, the first female detectives. I love that idea of
yeah,
exploring the past and finding those strong figures.
thanks.
Uh,
It's
yeah,
fun. I think there's
yeah.
nothing more fun. Like, I think we all kind of know that feeling when you're just maybe sitting around at the dinner table and you tell a story and
Hmm.
people go, no way, is that true? Like, even yesterday. So right now, as we're recording this, is the all the news about the submersible that went down
Hmm.
to view the Titanic. And one of the gentlemen who passed away, his wife was a descendant of her great grandparents died on the Titanic. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's like no way. Like sometimes we just come across things that it's like, that can't be true. So,
Mhm.
you know, fact is super fun compared to fiction sometimes.
It is, and then the way the universe comes together, and you think of the stories of people that can be told that
Yeah,
just sort
yeah.
of
And just the
sometimes don't get
reaction.
heard.
What I love is talking to kids at school visits, and then you tell them something and they yell, "No way!" And it's
And you
like, "Yes,
go,
yay!"
way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about yourself as an author for young people? I guess is a question before we talk about anything that's upcoming. You've talked about your reader history, and as a reading prof and English teacher, I'm always interested in that. But what would you say you've learned in this journey that you've been on so far?
Well, still learning, definitely still learning. Yeah, I mean, trying to balance what you think is really cool and interesting and amazing with what a 10-year-old might,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know. Like right here, I'm doing another book with the History Comics line, and it's World War II on the home front.
Love
And
it, love it.
so while I was home visiting my parents, my mom's mom lived through, they lived through World War II. So this is my grandmother's ration book,
Oh wow.
and with the stamps and everything for, what they used during World War II to eat.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think all that's so cool, but will a 10-year-old? I don't know. So in the writing of that book, I had to kind of like, you know, gather all my information. I usually take like a year to research stuff. So gather all my stuff and try to know my stuff, and then sit back and go, okay, well, what's going to be cool?
Yeah, yeah.
What's interesting? Because you have to. I do feel like I try to stay close to whoever 10-year-old me was,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
stray too far. So that's kind of hard. And then what should a young reader know? What would a young reader like to know? What would excite a young reader? Trying to keep balance with all those things.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And I'll say that on the education side too. Sometimes I'll have a book that I love or a topic that I love, and I go, "What do I do when kids don't automatically love this?" Because
It's like number one, don't get your feelings hurt,
right,
but also it's
exactly.
like, you don't want it to be a rejection of you.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which it's not. It's not.
right, right.
So you have another history comics coming up, which I
I do.
love.
Yeah, yeah. It'll come out on Halloween, which is kind of fun. World
Awesome.
War II on the home front, just looking at like kids did things, just what happened here. So,
Hmm.
because so much attention is on, the people who sacrificed their lives and fought for our freedoms. But there also was just it was interesting to write it during COVID, because we unified as a nation. The
Hmm.
speed limits dropped to 35 miles an hour. They were called like victory speed. And
Yeah.
do you think that the country would all agree to drop to 35 miles an hour? Like now, over the past couple of years, would we be unified? I don't know. So it
Yeah.
was an
Yeah.
interesting, there were so many examples of the way we really came together as a nation. So it was super interesting to research,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
context of now looking back at how we mobilized and how we were such a united front. So
Well, and I'll say, a lot of times people say you study history so that you don't repeat the past, but that's actually something, that idea of unity. Uh, why not look at that as an example of what to do, as opposed
right,
to the division and the
right.
strife? So that's a great example of looking at history for something that you might want to do again,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
a
This
way of
work.
thinking. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So upcoming events, titles, as well as any web spaces that you're active on that you want to make sure to share with listeners.
Um, I've mostly been in a writing mode, so
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not all that active online, but yeah, so I don't have like any place like that to promote. But yeah, I do have a couple more books coming out. I do really love the nonfiction picture book, like getting
Mm. Hmm.
and fired up. So I have a couple in the pipeline. One is Rachel Carson, and
Nice.
and it's interesting when you choose to do somebody that's been written about. I don't want to do cradle to grave biographies, so I just try to take one
Hmm.
slice of their life. And she had this amazing connection with being out in nature. And again, writing during COVID, all I could think of was I just want to be out, and
Hmm.
writing to a plugged in generation.
Yes.
It felt really good to say, look, she wandered the woods and lifted up rocks, and so anyway, so that's coming out, and a book about Teddy Roosevelt, um, which is, I don't usually do the dudes. I
Yes. Yeah.
usually do the ladies, but I came across this story. Did you know Teddy Roosevelt? There was an assassination attempt, and he survived it because of words.
I
And I
did
just
not
love it.
know
He was a talker his whole life. Talk, talk, talk. He was our most prolific writer.
that.
He has the most books. He wrote his own speeches. The guy never shut up. And so he, an assassin's bullet went through his chest, so went through his pocket, and inside his pocket was his speech, which was many pages, and his glasses case, and the bullet, it stopped the bullet.
Oh,
So
wow.
he was giving a speech, he gets shot, he goes on with the speech, he won't stop speaking, as his shirt, and you have to say it delicately, as his shirt grew redder, like
Uh-huh.
don't want to be too bloody. But anyway, so that's coming, just about how words saved Teddy Roosevelt. I just thought that was fascinating.
And what a great teaser or pitch for that. That's awesome. That is so awesome. The
And
pen
then
and the
a third
sword.
one's in the works too, Louisa May Alcott. So
Love it, love it. Well,
yeah,
it sounds like you continue to be prolific and continue to find stories to tell, which I love.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for taking some time. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share? I always like to make sure that we
Um,
hit all the marks.
yeah, just I think it's like a golden age of graphic novels. I
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
do. I just the things that people are coming out with, it's amazing. And it's if I were 10, I would be so pumped. So it is a really fun time. So
Yeah,
yay for
yeah.
this.
I am not 10 and I'm still pumped. I'm still
Yeah,
pumped about it.
right, right,
And may
right.
it continue.
Yeah, may it continue. Exactly, exactly. So,
All right.
well, thanks for having me. This was really
Yeah.
fun.
Thank you so much, Kate,
All
and
right.
glad to talk anytime.
Okay. Take care.
You
Happy summer.
too. Same to
Okay.
you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.